right now. And I'm going to formally welcome everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm Heather Goma, and I am the director of the Rutgers Alternate Route Program. And I'm truly, truly, truly grateful that you could all join us this morning for this important discussion about engaging families for student learning. And I want you to know that I am joined by an esteemed panel of experts on the issue whom I would like for you to meet. And here they are, right there. And they're also in the gallery, so you'll see these faces in the gallery. So we have with us today Kristen Whitaker, who is a former high school teacher, a 2015 recipient of the National Toyota Family Teacher of the Year, and a member of the leadership team at the National Center for Families Learning. We also have with us, she's waving hello to us right there. We also have with us Dr. Terry Ross, who is a former high school principal and founder of the New Teacher University, which we learned about through our LinkedIn group that he joined. Thanks for joining that, and thanks for joining us today. We also have with us Treese Moore, who is the author of Unreached, What Every Educator Wants to Know About Engaging Families for Equity and Student Achievement. And she's the founder and CEO of the Family Outreach and Engagement Network. Thanks for joining us, Treese. And finally, we have with us Dr.to-be Jaleel Hart, who is writing a dissertation on family school partnerships at the University of North Carolina, Charlotte, while also serving on the leadership team for the KIPP network in North Carolina. So thank you so much. I want to share that if you want to learn more about them, you can read their bios at go.rutgers.edu/parent23bio, or you can scan the QR code. And I'm going to be featuring that on a couple of slides as we move through, so that at any time you want to look up their bios and learn about them, you can. I just don't want to spend a whole lot of time on that because I'd rather learn a little bit more about what they know about parent engagement, right? So with that, we can jump right into things. So we're going to take full advantage of our hour together with this wonderful panel. And so here's the first question. And panelists, you should feel free to take yourselves off mute and respond in any order that you would like to. And the question is, why do you think family engagement is perceived as such a difficult undertaking? Who would like to start us off?
I don't mind starting us off. Good morning, everybody. Again, I'm Jaleel Hart, a PhD student at UNC Charlotte. And my research really lies at the intersection of culturally sustaining practices and family engagement, which kind of speaks to why family engagement may be perceived as so difficult for teachers to engage. And I think from a historical perspective, parents have been seen as folks who just need to bring kids to school, pick them up, and that be it, right? So we didn't typically think of parents as people who have the funds of knowledge to really pour into schools in different ways. So I think since we have been shifting from that understanding of and realizing that parents do have the funds of knowledge and resources and all kinds of things that they can bring to schools, we're trying to shift and find ways to make sure we do that in meaningful ways that are culturally sustaining, not offensive, appropriate for everyone, and accessible for others.
Thank you, Jaleel. Anyone else want to share around that?
Sorry, go ahead, Treese.
Thank you, Kristen. I agree with Jaleel, and what I'd say in addition is I don't know that teachers are prepared in their undergrad programs or even when they typically, so I could be wrong, but I don't know that there are a lot of programs out there that explain what does the partnership look like? What are the expectations? Who goes first? So in my experience, I was a director K-12 for equity and family engagement. And what I noticed is teachers that wanted to didn't know how to start, and parents that wanted to get involved felt like PTA was their only option. So I'd say the culturally responsive approach hasn't been really clear. And typically, we don't have teachers that look like some of the students that they're serving. And so I think if you're not familiar with the culture of students that you're teaching, that makes it difficult to know how do we start? Am I culturally responsive? What does that look like? So I would imagine that it's the disconnect culturally sometimes and the lack of clarity around what are the expectations of the partnership for families and for staff.
Okay, thank you.
I would agree with both. When schools were established in America, they were established in communities and everyone lived in those communities. Now, most teachers don't live in the communities that they teach in. So that's one disconnect. And because parent engagement looks like another thing to do, and is usually sanctioned by policy or some school rule, it looks like an extra piece. But what I found as a practitioner is that when it's organically done, and when teachers know how to build those relationships from the beginning of the school year, and by October, they have made it their business to track down each parent, and it's organically done just through relationships, that's what makes it a little easier. But because teachers don't live in the same community, as Therese said, so there are the cultural differences. And then it's another thing. And when new teachers are coming in, you're getting the curriculum, you're getting everything. You're learning how to do PLCs, you're learning how to do common planning. So it's so much coming at you. And then you have this parent piece. And then they're listening to the children who are saying things like, oh, you can call my mom, it doesn't matter. Well, that's what a child is going to say, because they want to kind of throw you off a little bit. So teachers have to know that, yes, I am going to call the parent. Yes, I am going to make it my business, and kind of just organically do it throughout. And then it's not like another thing to do when you have to fill out that parent log.
Okay, did you want to get the last word in that, Kristen?
Yeah, I actually agree with everything that was said. The only thing I would add is from the perspective of a new teacher, I felt overwhelmed when we had our first day of orientation, my first year. They said, oh, guess what, everyone? We're going to start doing home visits. And I'm like, is she crazy? I thought my principal was actually crazy. On top of learning lesson plans, classroom management, now you want me to go to people's houses. And I taught in DC and live in DC. I'm born and raised DC. So it wasn't for me an issue of going to these kids' neighborhoods. I was a part of the community, but you want me to learn, like I said, lesson planning and classroom management, and start to do family engagement. So I felt a big sense of being just completely overwhelmed, and all this extra time and commitment you want me to put in there. But what they didn't tell me was how much time I was actually going to save by having foundational relationships with my families in the community that I was serving. So it was presented as all this extra you had to do, not how much good it was going to do. So we're selling it wrong, instead of saying how it's going to help your craft and your practice. So it's sold to us as what the extra and not the benefit. So that's all I would add. Everything else my fellow panelists said was already clear cut.
Heather,
Okay, well, thank you all. Oh, go ahead.
Can I just add one more thing? I think in terms of the ways in which we think about parents and families also contributes to why we think it's such a difficult thing to tackle, right? There's so much narrative that is deficit framed. And we think of parents from a deficit perspective, and the things that they can't do, or the parents who are locked up in jail or don't engage for whatever reasons. And I think once we begin to shift that thinking to one that's asset-based and begin to position parents as folks who can bring things and support schools and support classrooms in ways that make sense, then we can more meaningfully build partnerships with them.
Okay, thank you all for that. And I think what I'm hearing from this is part of what we need to understand is we need to know the who, right? Who we're dealing with. We need to know how to deal with them. And I shouldn't say deal, but I should say be in relationship, right, with people, and what we need to understand, the what, like the purpose, and also just what that looks like as well. Those are some of the big takeaways that I'm getting from all of what each of you has said. And with the what, understanding that this is an investment, right? It's not something extra. This is an investment in what our classrooms could look like down the line. So thank you so much for such rich responses to that. So we're going to go on to the next question, which is right there. So, sometimes we do have a narrow sense of what parent engagement looks like. Some of us really think that it's just, about showing up at school for various purposes. And that's the only indicator of parental involvement. I heard you, Jalil, say, some people think it's just dropping your kids off at the school door. And so with that, what are some non-traditional experiences that we might include as parent engagement to expand our definition of what actually constitutes parental involvement?
Well, first of all, I forgot to welcome everyone this morning and say hello. Thank you guys for being out here on a Saturday morning learning about parental engagement. And I'm Terry Ross, and I'm here in Memphis, so thank you all. When I think about some of the non-traditional ways and experiences that we can engage parents, I think that we have to think about the context in which we are teaching and where we are. So are we in an affluent community with a lot of stay-home moms, or are we in a working class community with a few stay-home moms? And we could be in a community that's in high poverty, but still have some stay-home moms or dads, and we have to know how to bring that to the table, because anyone, if you want them in and engaged in volunteering, what do you want them to do when they get there? What do you consider engagement? So we can look at family engagement, and you all tell me, I'm gonna give you 3 different examples. Stay-home mom that volunteered 3 times a week and bring snacks on Wednesday. Is that effective? Or the mom that when you call them, they will come to the school and they'll come for special occasions? Or do you have the mom that the child is there every day, they have most of what they need, and you haven't seen them since registration? So which one of those would you consider to be effective parental engagement? 1, 2, 3, or all of the above? If you could put it in the chat, I'd love to see it.
Drop your messages in the chat. You
can do 1, 2, or 3. The mom who's bringing snacks on Wednesdays and 3 times a week, the mom who comes to special occasions and when you call, or the mom that's just sending the child every day. And they're there and they have what they need. Well, I would say that all 3 of those are effective engagements. It depends on the context that you're in.
Yep, some people got that right. Everybody's agreeing with you.
Yes.
Every one of them. Mm-hmm.
Yes. And if they come when you call them, but you have to push through the child's attitude, because the child's attitude is to keep you from calling the parent. I've had so many students to tell me, oh, you can call, they're not coming. Oh, my mom done. They've learned that from some teacher that they've been in the room and they said that to, and the teacher didn't call. And then by the time the mom makes it up there in November, the mom is upset, like, why haven't you called me? So make sure that you push through what the child is bringing and look at all aspects of engagement.
Thank you. Anyone else want to add on to that, or what else how we can expand our definition of what parent involvement and engagement looks like?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you, Dr. Ross, for that. And before I do that, I also forgot to mention, I taught kindergarten for 7 years in Raleigh, North Carolina. So I absolutely love that. And I apologize for leaving that part of my identity and experience out. So Dr. Ross mentioned a lot of great things examples of things that parents and families could do in schools to support. But what I would suggest is that we also need to think critically about how we can engage parents and families outside of schools, because we have a lot of parents who experience trauma from schools when they were in schools themselves, who then are reluctant to engage in schools in a number of ways, and who have work schedules who don't allow them to come during those traditional hours of schooling and engage in those ways. So while those are great, I think we need to also think about how we can reach out to and engage the parents who do work second or third shift, who can't come during those days. For example, when I did teach kindergarten, I had parents with those types of schedules. And we often had, most of the engagement activities I had were on Saturdays, because that's when I was able to engage most of my families. And of course, because school wasn't open, we used churches and we used libraries and we used things that were in their communities. So I had parents actually organize those types of activities that we did on Saturdays, because those are phone calls and emails that they could reach out and send and engage folks to come and work with our families on those Saturdays. So I think we need to think critically about how we can engage families outside of school in non-traditional hours and in ways that work best for them. So I'm always hesitant to give suggestions of things that you can do, because I think it needs to be tailored to the families that you're currently serving. So I'm happy to collaborate with you when you are in that space, but that's just my take on it.
And I agree with and love everything that was said so far. I might also add that in the event that some of the connection opportunities make it difficult for teachers, I love what Kristen said about feeling overwhelmed and feeling like there was so much to do. I would also add that maybe you could consider trying to call by phone or email or do some kind of intentional connection with the family so that they know that you're interested in partnering with them. And whatever engagement that they suggest or recommend or ask, you have an opportunity to find out what they want to do if you have initiated a connection with them in some way. I know high school teachers have 90, 120 students, so I wouldn't recommend that you try to do it all within one time period. But I have found that the teachers and the staff members who make an effort to have some type of initial engagement with the family to let them know who they are, that they do want to partner or that they do want to connect. When you do that individually, even if it takes half the school year, that makes families a lot more inclined to say, hey, this is how I'd like to be involved. This is what I'd like to do. This is how I'd like to partner. And it's typically non-traditional, but it also allows you to know more about the student and the family when you've had a chance to let them know you want to know.
Well, thanks for that, Therese. Go ahead, Kristen.
For me, this is where home visits played such a big part in my teaching style and how I develop relationships with families. I took that time in the beginning of the year to get to know the parents, the families, what they like and what they thought they could bring to the table. And that's how I got to see where they thought they would be most useful. So for example, I had parents who volunteered to grill for some after school activities or weekend activities. And I'm kind of competitive and I love to grill and I love sports. So if you tell me that you like to grill, I'm like, oh, you can't grill better than me. Automatically, they say, oh, next time you fire up the grill, then we're out there. So now I have 4 or 5 dads and moms who are like, oh, I'm grilling at the next thing because your burger's not better than my burgers. And I'm like, we'll see about that. And I kind of make it a challenge because I know you want to come see if my burgers are better. And side note, they're definitely better. And so, and then I have a couple of parents who love to garden and we started a school garden. And so they're like, oh, I like to grow this. I like to grow that. And then one thing that we really loved, we had a home remedy wall. So I worked at a school called Bell Multicultural. So we had people from all over and everybody came and posted their home remedy for whatever ailed you, you know. So, and sometimes I'd be like, oh man, I just don't even feel good today. Let me go see what they have on this home remedy wall. And people from all over the school would just come see what's on the home remedies. And so they felt involved and like they contributed. So it's not up for us to say what parental involvement looks like, what a contribution looks like. I like to co-design the process. I'm real heavy on co-design. And so sometimes it's for us to let the family decide what their contribution looks like and, you know, what they can contribute to the school. So I like to do away with what traditional involvement looks like. We need to involve the parents more. For far too long, it's been people in the boardroom telling the community, this is what you need to do, where we need to elevate lived experiences more and let them tell us. We're serving a population. When you're going into teaching, we're going into service of community. So who are we to tell the community what they need? We need to start listening more, and that's how we can start services. So I love this question and that we're thinking outside of the box and talking about what's non-traditional. And the only way we can do that and to break those barriers is really to start listening. So if anyone is like interested in home visits and things like that. I still, for the last 10 years, and I think Heather, I probably forgot to tell you this, I've been working for Flamboyant Foundation. Not sure if y'all heard of that, but I should have brought that as a resource. I'll type it in the chat. But
Okay.
we train, I'm still a citywide teacher trainer for Washington, D.C. on how to do home visits and how to actually just get information from families so you can leverage it and use that in your practice.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I think that based on some of the other questions, you'll be able to share a little bit about that actually in even when we talk about it in the next slide. But just some big takeaways that I got here, you know, just kind of being flexible around, you know, like what you're offering, you know, from an educator standpoint, wanting parents to partner with you, but also being open, right, to whatever parents are interested in contributing. So, and I heard your words, Kristen, saying co-design, you know, which is fantastic. The idea of picking up the phone, calling, right, and asking, right, to get a sense of what parents want to be involved. I think that that's fantastic. And then just understanding that parents are just going to demonstrate their partnership in different ways, all of that. So I want to thank all of you for your contributions to that part of the discussion. I want to recognize that there are people in the chat that are asking questions, and we are going to have space. We're leaving time at the end so that we can engage with some of those questions. So you'll have a chance, participants. And I do want to make sure that I point out for people who are arriving now that we have a fantastic panel of people with us with a range of experiences. I mean, you heard Jalil talk about how he taught kindergarten, and then Terry Ross also mentioned that he also taught kindergarten. And so I just want to bring that to your attention because the range of people we go from elementary school, middle school, all the way up to high school. So a lot of times I think we think that high school parents are not going to be as engaged, but the people on this panel have figured that out. So we want to just make sure that that somebody is here who can answer your question and your concern. And we have somebody who can really grill. So I'm like, Jalil, I think I'm closer to DC than you though. So I might.
Come on, everybody.
And so with that, we can move on to this next question because yes, families bring a lot to the table in the school-home partnership. You know, we sometimes underutilize those funds of knowledge. I think you used that word, Jalil. We underutilize those funds of knowledge. So how can we better use what we learn about families to improve student learning in our classrooms?
I can start us off with this one because I have this one. I taught high school, 11th and 12th grade history. And I don't know if anyone had this experience where you get the roster and you see that one name, that kid's reputation who precedes them, and you're like, oh boy, I'm in for it. Yes, I had that one name, and I'm like, oh, what am I gonna do? And so I had no other choice. I said, I'm gonna have to start with the home visit. This kid declined to come to the home visit, but I went to their house anyway. And the family cooked dinner and everything. Now, let me go ahead and say, this is the only time I went to a home visit and the family cooked dinner and all that. So if you're geared up to say, oh, I'm about to do home visits to get free dinners, no, you're not about to do that, okay? This is the only time it ever happened in my whole 10 years of teaching. So just want to put that out there. But the kid, we had a project for DC history, and they had to write about all these DC landmarks. And this kid just came in the classroom and just didn't want to do a thing, just attitude just blocked him from just everything. And I'm like, okay. So what I learned during the home visit is that he loved to ride his bike, he loved his dog Mojo, and he loved to take pictures. So when he came in class with this attitude, I'm like, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to ask him to take out his phone that I know he has, but I know it's illegal. And I'm going to ask him to show me what he took pictures of. And of course, I saw his bike, his dog, all of this. And so I said, all right, I know how I'm going to tell him to do his project. I said, won't you, instead of writing about it, won't you go take pictures, of all the DC landmarks, and then write just a little blurb about it, and we're going to post them in the classroom, and it'll be like your own little museum exhibit. Let's just do that. He was so excited and took the best pictures, wrote about it, posted up, and he tells everyone, like, I got my own little art exhibit right in the classroom. Then we moved it to the hallway so everybody could see, and he's just so proud, invited his parents, everyone, and I'm sitting there like, I just tricked him into doing his whole project. He did more than everybody else, met all the standards and everything. Best attitude ever. It just changed everything. And this is like my second year of teaching. We're still cool. He's married with kids now. And like this relationship still exists years later. His mom is actually the one who wrote, his mom and principal is who nominated me for that Teacher of the Year award. And it changed his kind of whole perspective. And I felt proud because I felt like, oh, I tricked you into doing your work and you didn't even realize it. So I told all his teachers, because you have to share this information with all the teachers, at least in high school, you know, you share students. Like, this is how you get to this kid's heart. So we all tried that. And so it takes a little bit of extra work. You know, we did have to tailor the project, but he met his standards. He graduated. Most importantly, he didn't feel like a name on a roster. He felt like somebody took some interest in him and cared about him, what he liked, and just, he felt safe. He felt like well taken care of, and it changed his whole perspective. And that was what I was proud. I was most proud of in my, you know, about myself and about my craft. And I knew that making relationships with these families made a difference. And that was what changed my perspective. And I was gung-ho on home visits and family involvement forever. It changed me. And that's when I decided to become a citywide teacher trainer. And that's what took me on a whole new perspective. And I had to go like tell the world, like, this is how we're going to reach these kids, these families in the community. So
Wow.
sorry, I had to start.
Thank you so much. Wow, thank you so much. That's so rich.
Can I piggyback on that?
Paid off. Go ahead, Trish. Treese, I'm sorry.
Kristen, thank you. That was a phenomenal example, and it speaks to what I would recommend all teachers do, and not necessarily just from the perspective of one student. So you went above and beyond with your specificity around, what does this student need me to do? I have also seen teachers do what you do, and I've noticed that sometimes when they're able to take the cultural assets and norms, they find out from the family, what are some of the family traditions? What are some of the family interests? What are the students' interests? And I believe when you know more about, like Kristen, when you know more about the family and the student, what their interests are, what activities and what types of things happen around their community, within their home that they'd like you to know, then you make your classroom work connect to some of those experiences. You allow the student to draw on the knowledge that they have about their community, about their experiences, and come up with a way to affirm or to have the student identify what is it about their culture, what is it about their family norms, what is it about their experiences that is in their mind positive, or even something that they might not know is positive. Help your students identify the things that are connected to their experiences and their knowledge that typically don't get honored or acknowledged. And you come up with ways to have your class assignments, your presentation opportunities, your follow-up with class assignments. Tell your students, I understand that your family and your community are real for you. And I want you to help me as a teacher understand how to make the connection between your context, your lived experiences, and this assignment. So I think it makes it really easier for the teacher if instead of sometimes them feeling like, wow, I really have to know all about my students, have your students introduce themselves and their family in some kind of context with the assignments that you give them. Help them make parallels, encourage them to do the assignment and then make a connection to something that they already know.
Wow, also very rich. Thank you so much.
Can I
Go
add to
right
that,
ahead.
Heather?
Right ahead.
Oh, so one of the things that I'd like to add to that, which is all really, really great, when we are working with leveraging our what we learn about families, one of the first things that we have to do is acknowledge the parents and families as the child's first teacher. So when we do that, we break down that barrier, and then they're willing to share those things, and you're willing to find out what are those funds of knowledge they have. And when the children, when you acknowledge that, as Treese said, when you're able to reference a community landmark while you're talking, find out if that community, like Philly cheesesteaks, where's the best Philly cheesesteak, so that when you're talking, sometimes you can mention that. But acknowledging those parents as the first teachers. And one of the ways you do that is when you call the parent, even if the student has been doing something, you're calling about something bad, you start off with saying, if it's mom or dad, first of all, I want to thank you for getting them here every day. They're on time, they have what they need. We can always find something to compliment, because what you're doing then is you're acknowledging that you're giving them something positive, so that now you can build that bridge to tell them what's going on. And you've also acknowledged that they care, that they want them to do well. And now after that, you start using the term we, because I know we want him to be, or we want her to be. And now you're being inclusive in your language, and try to get rid of these children in this classroom type language, and over here, and when I come here, and what my child is doing. Keep it centered around what's in their community, what's in your classroom, and their child at the time.
Wow, so many gems. And it looks like we still have treasure to dig out. Come on, Jaleel.
I'll just add something real quick and really briefly. My colleague said so many wonderful things, but I think if we start thinking about family engagement and family school partnerships as not something that we do to and for families, but rather something that we do with families, that will help us to begin to use what they know, what they bring, what they value, what they experience, and leverage those to support not just their students, but our whole entire school community. But I'll just leave it at that. My colleagues are wonderful.
Wow, thank you all so much. And I'm not even going to get into following that up with anything. I want that to rest just like you gave it, and we'll move on. Because I also do want to make sure that we have time for the candidates to share their questions. And so one thing is this, a lot of you are mentioning being culturally responsive and things like that. And we know that as our nation grows more diverse, so do the languages of our students' families. And, more and more we're encountering barriers to homeschool communication. So let's talk a little bit about that. How can teachers navigate language barriers when they don't speak the parents' language?
I can kick us off. I think at the surface level, you need to understand that there are language barriers, right? And I say that, and some people already know that. I have seen so many instances where people don't understand that there are language barriers. And I don't mean language as in linguistics, I mean cultural languages, the nuances in phrases we use, the ways in which we communicate, the words we use. And from a personal experience, I was working on a research project and engaging with families, and I kept saying this phrase. I'm not gonna tell you what it was, but I was saying this phrase. They didn't know what it was. And when I talked to them, they said, well, we say this differently, right? Like this is if this is what you mean, this is what you should say. So when I think of language, I don't just mean like Spanish or French, Portuguese. I'm talking about the cultural and linguistic differences and the nuances and the ebonics that people might use. So I think that you have to know first where you're working, the families that you're working with, and the ways in which they communicate with each other.
That's very, very helpful. And if somebody might be able to take us though in that direction of like an actual language, not a dialect of a language, but maybe we don't speak Spanish, or we don't speak Urdu or something, like how can we address that? And thank you again, Jaleel, for even enlightening us around, we also have to understand there's some cultural language issues that need to be addressed. Go ahead.
Well, my high school there were 23 languages. But I found that there's one universal language that all families understand, and that's love and compassion. And when you have that and the children can feel it, children are more close to that than anyone else, because we unlearn a lot of those natural feelings as we get older and through education. But children can feel it. And when the children go home feeling safe and loved, the families are going to come. I had 23 languages. I spoke only one, and we all communicated daily. The district will have resources for you to do translations. We know to go and Google translation. They love to do it. But one of the biggest things is building that relationship with the children. It's sort of like building a field of dreams. When you build that relationship with the children, the parents will come. You take a child that's not excited about school, but they get to your classroom and they're at home talking about school. And what I did was, as a principal, I made sure, I always told the teachers that my domain is the hallways, the entire campus. Your domain is the classroom. I'm going to make sure that the culture out here is set so that when they come into the classroom, that's your space to make sure that it's set. So I made sure there was always excitement, there was something going on. And I ate so much food from so many different cultures when they would, during holidays that I weren't familiar with, and they would kill the goat or the lamb, I would get fresh meat, because I communicated with the families through love and compassion and making the children feel whole, and those languages will break down and we'll figure out how to communicate, because we have all of the electronic devices. Most districts are going to have translators and some type of platform that you can get your memos and stuff. So the biggest thing is to plan, but make sure that you let the children know that you care.
And I also, I agree with Terry. But having been for 17 years on the district level serving teachers, what I noticed is, just like Terry said, the district has resources and tools, but I recommend that the conversation for teachers not be about what they need to do. And the reason, and I agree with what you have to do, because I even noticed in the chat, someone said that they text the sister and that made it easier. But I recommend that districts do the job of making it easier for teachers. So in my region, we have over 130 languages were spoken in my particular district here in the Northwest. And so that was surprising to a lot of people, because typically the Northwest is not seen as a really multicultural area. But what we found is there weren't a lot of solutions around the country for being in a district where there's 130 different languages. So what I was able to do was work with the language director on the district level, invite teachers to be a part of the conversation, and invite parents to be a part of the conversation, and find out, according to the teachers, the principals, and the parents, what should the district do to make this easier for you? What are the resources we need to make sure are available on the school level? And what kind of processes and supports need to happen so that you have the interpreter you need when you need them, so that you have the language line available in the way that you need it, so that you have the building level people that will help. So I really, I agree with Terry that there's love and compassion that makes it work. And I agree with Jaleel that we can understand the nuances if we talk to and understand and ask. But on an individual basis, it is very difficult for teachers to address it if they don't have a district that has handled it at the top level, in terms of clearly stating what are the resources, identifying with teachers and parents what resources work, and how should we provide them to the buildings on the building level.
Well,
I'll make this response really quick because my colleagues definitely covered most of it. The districts definitely should provide supports. DCPS definitely provided a hotline. I definitely used a lot of family, siblings were eager to translate. And then there's usually somebody in the building who spoke a language, so I didn't have much trouble there. But in my current job now, I do a lot with virtual reality, and I'm passionate about closing the digital divide. So I've been looking for free resources. There's 2 apps, Spatial and Engage, that I do a lot of lesson plans in for teachers. And these apps now, especially virtual reality apps, they have automatic features that can translate up to, Engage, both Engage and Spatial, and I'll type it in the chat now. They do 70 languages at one time. And so sometimes you got to be a little creative I'm typing spatial, so I said it wrong. So you got to be a little creative when we need to be. So what I just put in the chat is 2 virtual reality apps. You don't necessarily have to have like the Oculus or Meta goggles that they're calling them now, because anything that I create in the virtual reality world, I make sure it's accessible on laptop, phone, tablet, or whatever. But side note, if you're interested in virtual reality in your classrooms, hit me up. But those are 2 free apps that will do some translating for you in real time. So you can have like a virtual classroom and get live translation.
Wow, thank you so much. And thanks for the resources as well. And I do it's just so much that was in there. And I do think that, yeah, like it is the district's responsibility to try to figure out how to make it easier for families and for teachers. That all of that was really rich. And even what you were sharing, Terry, about at the end of the day, like the story that can get communicated, or the message that can get communicated, is that I care deeply about your child, right? Based on how I treat them. And then the extra effort to engage with them culturally, so that you're not talking past people, is what Jalil was pointing out to us too. So much, so many good things going on in that response. And so this is going to be the last question before we turn it over to candidates who have questions that they want to ask. And it is a little bit of a tough one, and it's a situation that I think, is few and far in between, but, it does happen. And so, what are some ways that we might handle a situation where parents been rejecting calls or has become irate around us calling? What are your thoughts about this one?
When I started doing home visits, I had a lot of irate no's and no, you can't come to my house, been called everything out the book. And I was like, you know what? I get it. I don't want you at my house either. So I understand the feeling. I will be honest with them. I understand. I'm like, but let's go get a cup of coffee. So I had my favorite little Starbucks. Well, let me treat you to a cup of coffee, because who wants to say no to me treating you to something? Or I would incentivize, because high schoolers love incentives. Sorry for those who teach the babies. Elementary school, middle school, that wasn't my thing. But I would attach maybe incentive to it, or I'll give your kid extra credit, or, that kind of thing. And then the kids would do the heavy lifting. So that was fun for me, because they would kind of press their parent out and I wouldn't have to. And that was helpful. So it takes a little, extra work. You kind of have to have tough skin sometimes. I wouldn't push it to the point of course, harassment or things like that. Sometimes a no is just a no, and you'll have to fall back some. But then sometimes you have to find a common ground. If I saw, like I said, I'm kind of competitive. So if I saw a parent who had a Ravens t-shirt on, and I'm a huge Commanders fan now, I'd be like, ooh, that's why your team sucks. And they're like, what? And so you have to find something, or a mom who I'm like, oh man, your hair is gorgeous, and it'll soften them. Sometimes you have to find something that'll just soften their heart a little bit and try that angle. So try a couple different angles, and because sometimes they'll come in and you have to realize their school experience might not have been a good one. I never, if a parent comes in, I never sit behind my desk, because that desk right there could just be a symbol of a power struggle. Like sometimes you just have to take it outside of the actual classroom, because it's not you that they're rejecting, it's their personal school experience that they had. They could have a bad memory of when they were in school. So you kind of have to find a way to get around there. So try different things. Have tough skin. Don't take it personal. It might not be you. You could be fighting against something that they went through previously that you don't know about.
Okay. Anyone else want to add on to that?
Sure, I can hop in here really quickly. Just a little background about my experience teaching kindergarten. It was in a predominantly white neighborhood, and area, not a very rural, but a rural part of Wake County, and near Raleigh. And I was one of the only Black teachers at the school, and I was certainly the only Black male teacher at the school. And here I am teaching kindergarten to all these little white kids with white families. And I think that context is important because it might give you a sense of how parents perceived me, and how I was welcomed into the school. So when Kristen was talking about sitting behind the desk and those kinds of things, I needed to do that kind of work because it allowed people to see me as the authority figure in the classroom, which that needed to be the case in those instances. And I think the way that I handled some of those situations, I would not do now. So I'll just throw that out there. But I think being able to communicate in ways that people understand is really important. And also setting the tone with I know that you want what's best for your kid, and I also want what's best for your kid. So how can we take what we both think is right for your kid, put them together, and then come up with something great? And I think when you lead with love and then in a tone of partnership, and from a space of, I really want to use what you know to help me bridge the gap between what's going on here. Because while we want to think we're really not the experts, right? We know how to teach, but we don't know the kids as well as their families do. So I think bridging those gaps and leading with love, I think, is really important.
Wow. Well,
And
go ahead, Terry.
I was just going to say, remembering customer service and going back to acknowledging the parents as the first teachers, that's going to do a lot to get those parents in the language that we use. I used to work for a gentleman named Dr. Jeff Howard. He owned the Efficacy Institute in Reading, Massachusetts. And he used to talk about inducing a growth mindset. And when he talked about that, I've used that in so many different ways to even inducing parents into ways of helping me with their child. And by doing that, I mean just telling them, oh, I know you're sending them to school for this. I see how hard you're working for XYZ. And leaving that in the messages and using the term we, because I know we want them to graduate. And I do want to clear up one thing, Heather, when Jalil was talking about kindergarten, I cheered for him because I don't fool with kindergartners. They'll ruin your reputation. I was a high school special ed teacher, so I was giving him a big raise to roof for teaching kindergartners, but I was an elementary school principal and I loved kindergartners. That's where I would go and get my energy boost from during the day, because they love to run up and hug you and leave spots on your clothes and stuff. But really acknowledging the parents as the first teachers and letting them know that we're here as a team and using the partnership as everyone has talked about, that's one of the ways, and leaving those loving messages for them. They'll come through. I've had yet to meet a parent that didn't come through. And one of the things that I did was I started teaching in the 90s. So I didn't have a cell phone in the mid 90s. So I would call parents on the way to work, which meant I called them on my way out the door on a landline. So it would be 6:30 in the morning. So just trying different times to catch them. And by me calling them that time of morning, I will catch them and give them that little inducement about, hey, I know we're here to do this. And next thing I know, that same child who's been telling me my mom is not going to answer the phone, you can't get her. The reason she wouldn't answer the phone because she was at work all day. She went to work at a time that we were at school, and she got off at a time that we were probably going to bed. So by me calling her in the morning, that's how I called her. And he was using that to his advantage.
Wow. Did
Can
you
I
want to say
add
something,
something?
Patrice? Okay.
Yeah, really quickly. I would imagine that in the case where a teacher has been used, not a teacher, a parent has been used to the calls being about something that may not be positive, or maybe the parent is angry and has a reason to be, or doesn't have a reason to be. But in the cases where you've laid the foundation and you have set the tone that we don't just call when there's a problem, and we call with good news, and we call with things that you really want to know, things that are helpful, things that might provide benefit. I think in the event that you create a reputation as a school, not just individual teachers having to do this by themselves, but when the school creates a reputation that allows parents to know when we call, it could be a good thing. And because we've had a lot of parents to say, I only get a call when there's something bad. And then, of course, there are irate parents just for no reason. So I know that's possible. But in some cases, if the parent is used to getting negative calls, they can tend to reject calls just on the assumption that the call is about something negative.
Makes complete sense. And so we'll put a period there. I feel like this was the, everybody gave like an answer around an I. I heard incentivize, I heard intentions, matter. I heard inducing parents, with positivity, and just imagining a new way of showing up in parents' lives so that those calls don't get rejected, right? So with that, I just want to move us forward so that we can get to the candidate questions, because many of them, got up so early as well with us. Not as early as you, Treese, though, who, by the way, everyone, is with us from Seattle, Washington. So it's like we're 3 hours ahead of her. So with that,
but I was born and raised on the East Coast, so shout out to East Coast folks.
Yay. So this is going to move us to our open mic segment, where we're going to take questions from participants who would like to avail themselves of the panel's expertise. So if we have about 10 minutes for this, if that long. So if a candidate has a question, if you wouldn't mind, just take yourself off of mute, because I can't really see this whole gallery, and you can ask a question. Okay.
I have a question I put in the chat.
Okay, go ahead and read it.
So my question is, how do we help parents that do not have the time to go to events or see people? Most of the parents, I don't have easily have parents. I have a lot of people from the state because they're owned to the state. So the question is like, how do I do that? I'm currently right now looking into doing monthly newsletters. What else can I do if the parents don't have the facilities or the cell phones and all that? Like, what is, other than not using technology?
I don't mean to throw the question back at you, but I would ask them. I mean, I have a lot of different ways that I have engaged parents who aren't able to come to schools. I've had parents take lamination that needs to be cut off for a new bulletin board. I've had parents organize, like I said, different activities for us. So I would ask those parents, what are the ways that you want to be engaged that you have access to, right? I think access is the biggest thing that we can support families with. So I would ask them, what are the ways that you envision yourself being engaged in our school and supporting your students? Because they will know best.
Does that make sense, Georgios?
Yeah, yes. And my next question would be, how do we support parents that do not have the resources for their child with disabilities?
So I think for that one, is there somebody else who wants to answer it from the panel? Because what I was just going to mention is that there are resources in the state of New Jersey that are designed specifically for that purpose. And I can provide you with at least 2 that I will send to you directly. I'm going to make a note of it, and I will make sure that I send those to you directly. Because they tend to be like advocacy related, and because this is being recorded, I just want to keep this as clean as possible for you. Okay. All right. Okay. Anyone else? Go ahead, Ayabo.
Actually, I don't have a question. It's more of a thank you to the panel, because I've been going through situations in my position that with parents that honestly I was beginning to take personal, and I'm getting emotional right now. And I'm honestly almost at the point where I started thinking, is this past really for me? So I just want to thank you guys for letting me know I shouldn't take it personal. Thank you so much.
Yes. Hang in there, and thank you for having that aha, because we have to remember that we are customer service. And oftentimes some of our parents are so young that we have to, in a slight way, teach them some of the things that they need to do. And I had a lot of things in my school as a principal where I would have parent meetings, and we literally gave them, this is what you do tonight at home. When I was an elementary principal, I would go to the dollar store and buy the 10 sheet cake pans for $1 and the little pack of magnet alphabets, and send those to home with parents on literacy nights to tell them, make sure you let the child make words, sort of like we unscrambled at the beginning. I would give them little pegs to teach them about sorting, a little Ziploc bag of things. So really teaching the parents how to help develop their child. And you do it in a way that's not condescending, in a way that you're not telling them you're not doing this. You do it in a way, oh, this is what we're working on now, and this is how you can help.
Thank you
Well,
so
thank you.
much.
Thank you so much too. There's a question in the chat about integrating parents. Pardon me.
Yeah, we are discussing another question, right? Integrating parents.
Well, one of the things I found for that question is on that parent, when they sign the student up for registration, they have several numbers that you can call. And if they don't answer that call, you go to those other numbers and you just may hit grandma, or you may hit that aunt who's the rock in the family. And when they find out that they're not answering, a lot of your stuff is, and then the parent will come up, well, why did you call them? Oh, well, let me show you. I've tried to call you 5 times and I didn't get you. So I knew that we wanted to make sure that Terry had what he needed. So I just called the next person. You may get dad, you may get another person. So don't stop with the first number. Try all of the numbers in the emergency list.
Thank you so much, and thanks for reading my mind and being able to carry on without me while I was choking. Thanks so
And then
much.
that's also when you involve the student. I don't know what grade student you working with, but for me in high schoolers, that's where I would incentivize the student. I'm like, oh, I've been trying to get a hold of your parents. I've exhausted all the numbers. I've exhausted the emails. I would, slide you a few extra credit points if you could, or homework pass if I can get to your parent by the end of the week, and then they'll be on a full rush to get me in contact with your parent. And I also wanted to say to, and forgive me if I pronounce your name wrong, Ayabo, if you have to remember, we're human too. So it's okay to have those days where you feel like depleted, but never forget self-care, okay? Like, you gotta take some time for yourself. It's okay for you to have that day. And just remember, like, we're human too. It is okay.
And thank you, Chris. And we're going to get Kasturi's question now.
Yeah, this is actually regarding, to be honest, I have a issue with few parents, right? Rather than more towards engagement. So that's why I waited till end. So this is what it is like. I teach chemistry at high school level, and I have 4 honor classes, right? This is the thing with them. The parents show up for parent-teacher conferences.